Welcome back to FURYCAST. But first, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. And don't forget to sign up to the mailing list for my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild. Sign up now. The link is in the description. My guest today has been a street fighter, an amateur and professional mixed martial artist, and a national and international champion in the art of catch wrestling. He's currently a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Derrick. Today on the show, all the way from the United Kingdom, I welcome my friend, Chris Crossan. You are a man of multi-disciplines in your field of expertise, which is the martial arts. And I had no idea that you had. Let me just rattle off some of the styles in which you've studied. I believe you've studied all these styles pretty intensively. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, catch wrestling, kickboxing, luta libre, MMA, judo, sumo, freestyle wrestling, sambo. Did you do sumo and sambo or just?
Yeah, well, I've never trained a day of sumo in my life, but I noticed there was a European Open. So I jumped in like the day before. I contacted the guy. I got picked up at the train station, drove in a car with a load of guys I'd never met before. Next thing I was in the European Open. There's all guys who were seriously into it from like Switzerland, all around the continent. I managed to get a bronze medal, so that was fun.
For sumo?
Yeah, and it's amateur sumo, so you're allowed to strike with slaps and try and knock them down. I pushed them out the dojo. But yeah, it was fun. Some big guys, as you can imagine. A lot of judo players and whatnot jumped in. It was fun.
Now, the open hand strikes here in the U.S., I don't know how it went in the U.K., but before MMA was like legal in a lot of states, we had pancrase rules. So you'd have MMA fights, but no closed fist. You had to strike with an open palm. Did you guys have that?
Yeah, we used to have that here as well. Yeah.
So did I miss any of the any styles that you've trained in?
I think that's everything, like JKD as well. I was under Sifu Larry Hartel's system. My Sifu was Sifu Mick Shaw. I used to travel to Doncaster, which is like 2 hours away. You see, I was in Doncaster for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because when I started to train, there was no Jiu-Jitsu where I live. So I'd travel. It was like a 180-mile round trip to learn from a couple of blue belts. And I just learned like tough kind of guys in the Jiu-Jitsu school back then. And that's how I met Mick Shaw, and he invited me to take part in the JKD Grappling Association Instructor Program. So that's how I got on board with all that. I've always been a big fan of learning multiple arts, and I just think that everything has something to offer. I also think it's good to get out there and compete under different rule sets.
Now, here in the States, it's pretty uncommon for someone not to have a Taekwondo background of some sort. Did you ever cross-train any kicks?
Ever.
Really?
Never, funnily enough, although I did contact karate, and my coach, Marjan Barry Norman, he had come through Taekwondo also. So he was a black belt in Taekwondo and also in contact karate, as well as being a Thai coach. So the way we did kicks and stuff was very similar. It's like Korean style of kicking.
Yeah, the Korean.
I see that in the States, it's huge out there. Yeah, Taekwondo.
Well, yeah, and when one day I'll interview someone that came up in the ITF style back in the 80s and 90s when it was still a very hard style. Like you go in and get your ribs cracked, get your nose bloodied.
Il Cho, I remember I'd read about him in the magazines.
Yeah. It wasn't. And then there's a book called A Killing Art, which talks about the history of Taekwondo, how it came from, Korean military or whatnot. But anyway, let's get on to some of the questions I have for you, because you've led a very interesting life. And if I leave anything out, if there's anything like you were part of a what do you guys have out there? The soccer firms?
Yeah, hooligans.
If you have anything like that, let me know. Go ahead.
My pastor was a football hooligan. He was like a well-known football hooligan. Like, obviously, he wasn't a pastor at the time, and he ended up in prison and whatnot. And he was living on the street. He was a tramp living on the street, and some Christians would approach him. He was like an addict and whatnot. And he'd chase them, tell him to leave him, but then they start giving him chocolate and stuff. So he's like, I'll listen to these guys, and they pray for him. And he wasn't interested. He just wanted the free food. And then they go back night after night. Then one night he wasn't there. He'd been taken in the hospital. He was on a life support machine. They went to the hospital after a couple of nights to check on him. And his mother was just about to sign the like the paper to have his machine turned off, and they asked if they could pray for him. And she said, "Look, there's no point. You know, the doctors have told us they prayed for him. You know, praise God, he woke up." And that was 25 years ago, and his life's totally different now. He goes in the jails preaching and whatnot, and he's had keys to prisons that he used to be in. So it's a remarkable story.
Is
So he
that
went
is
from
that
being
Graham
a
Seed?
hooligan, Graham Seed, yeah, he went from being a hooligan to being a preacher, yeah.
Yeah, I saw one of your videos you were talking about, so I looked him up. He does seem completely interesting, and that's why I
Yeah,
want to talk to you
big
because
mountain of a man. It's big thing around here. Football, who like it was big, football hooliganism was a
yeah,
big thing.
yeah, that's why I'm interested in your story because there's a lot of intersection between things we're interested in, the martial
Yeah,
arts, motorcycles. We talked a little bit about that,
gangs.
you
Yeah,
know, Christianity, faith, things like
yeah,
that. But let's start at the beginning. Tell me about where you grew up, what part of the country, where your childhood, and what was that like?
yeah. I grew up in the north of England, in like northeast, in a lot of different council estates, which is like where it's free housing, and a lot of these areas, like when I was 13, 14, there was, lots of riots and stuff in our areas, riots, like running battles with the police. And, Peter twocking was a big thing then, like taking without owner's consent. So where I live, even to this day, I bought a house in a better part of town now, praise God. But, when I go back to where I grew up, there's like the council's built all ramps in the road so you can't drive over 15 miles an hour because people would steal cars and just drive them about and whatnot. It was just, there was nothing going on. There was a lot of unemployment in the 1980s because it was once like a great industrial area, and all the industries closed down. Everything got privatized. So it was just everywhere was just really a breeding ground for crime and antisocial behavior. So that's why we had a lot of boxing gyms and kickboxing gyms and whatnot popping up. So that's one good thing that came from it. It was like kind of the only way out for a lot of people was sport or the military or obviously crime, but that's not really a way out.
Did you say, I missed the city? Did you say Manchester?
Stockton-on-Tees. This is like, yeah, Middlesbrough, Stockton-on-Tees, Teesside, the area is called. It's a lot of like, a lot of Irish moved here and stuff back in the day. A lot of different races here. It's like a melting ground for crime and whatnot.
And you said it was a good place for kickboxing and martial arts?
Yeah, martial arts was big, and it had a big it was really famous for the nightclubs. We had like a nightclub, the Mall. It was like the top nightclub in the country, although it was in like an unfashionable part of town, part of the country. Sorry, it was really big, and they'd have all types of nights on and guests and whatnot. And so we had really good door agencies through here, like the doormen were serious. They were all into martial arts and like huge bodybuilders and whatnot. I remember actually, like back in when I was a young lad on the doors in like my early 20s, like the guy who ran our company, Marty, he was European champion kickboxing, but he got shot. So that's how he was like my original grappling coach. So I started to look after the company for him. Then, like just 20 miles down the road in Sunderland, Ian Freeman ran the doors there, who was in the UFC in the Machine Freeman. Then the next city
him, yeah.
in between them, the next city in between them, we had Eddie Elwood running the doors. It was Mr. Universe. It was like, it was serious business. You know what I mean? It was like we had some really good like door companies and whatnot in the region. Yeah, it was always like that, the northeast of England.
So now, what do you think in your area of the world? I understand the guys needed it for their profession. Also, rough areas, you need the self-defense. But what do you think woke people up to martial arts? You think it was Bruce Lee?
When I was growing up, I remember like hearing about Bruce Lee when I'm in the school playground. As a little kid, people were like, you had TVs and stuff to tell you about Bruce Lee and whatnot. And I think that Bruce
people
Lee
that had
was
TVs.
the thing.
So not everyone had TVs.
No, not everybody had them. And if they did, they'd be black and white. I remember the first time I seen a color TV. It was in like a shop where they were selling them. I couldn't believe it. I thought, whoa, wait, what's this? Yeah, it was just if anybody had a TV, it was black and white back then. Yeah.
And
This
you and
is in
I are
like the
pretty close
early
to
80s.
age. How old are you,
Yeah,
if you don't mind me asking?
77 I was born.
77. So yeah, you're younger than me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting because I had a black and white TV, but it was, here in the States it was pretty ubiquitous television sets in the 80s. Everybody watching
Yeah.
the Cosby Show, Night Court, whatever. But and of course Benny Hill, your great import
Benny Hill,
from
yeah.
the
I
great
remember
import.
hearing that everybody loved Benny Hill in the States.
Oh yeah. Dude, I think just a couple nights ago, I was in a group of people and I just did the theme music, and everybody started laughing. Everybody loves that it's just a part of people's
It was
childhood.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was big over here.
Yeah. So what do you think it was? You think it was just a necessity and being a rough and tumble area,
Yeah,
martial
most
arts kind of
definitely. Yeah, it was like Teesside growing up. It was not so much weapons. The northeast of England has been one more of like fist fighting, whereas over in Manchester, the northwest, and Liverpool, it was always there was fighting men, but it was like a gun culture there. But in the northeast of England, it was like people sorting things out with the fist a lot of the time. Then they shake hands and put it to bed. It was kind of like traditional old school values kind of thing. That really has died out recently, though. You don't hear of that much anymore.
same here. So then how did you
Yeah.
get involved with the martial arts?
When I was when I was really young, there was a Mugendo club right next to my school, which was like
Explain that to me.
kickboxing. Mugendo, it was like kickboxing, like meant no limits. But I think it actually was like Wadoru karate, what went over into kickboxing because kickboxing was like a big thing in the 80s. It was above the waist kickboxing. And they had a lot of guys who were going out and winning wacko Europeans and whatnot. So if I had money, I'd go and train. I'd remember the moves. I'd always go back and train it and take notes and stuff. I'd be like 10-year-old taking notes and whatnot. And a lot of my friends did it. So whoever went that week, if everyone didn't go, we'd like get together and practice and whatnot. But then from being flat, I'd just do it the odd time. But from being 14, I trained like martial arts seriously. I've never stopped to this day. I got into like contact karate then, which was a blessing because Arjan Barry, who's still coaching now to this day, he was like a pro boxing coach. He was coaching Thai boxing as well as full contact karate. And I was also going to the amateur boxing club from 14 to 18. So I was having a blend, a mixture of different striking arts back then.
So so take me through that first experience you had walking through the dojo or the gym, whatever it was.
Yeah,
You
as a kid,
what was
yeah,
that like?
it was good. I was excited, really excited. It was in a place called Kaiora Hall, which is like an old spooky building, which had been a prisoner of war camp in the Second World War. It'd been used as a prisoner of war camp. And it was a spooky old eerie building. It was like what you have here in England, like a really, really old building with like a real tall building. And we had like a sports hall. But I remember going in and the guy that was coaching, Mickey McHugh, he's a heavyweight and he'd bring people in to spar and we'd watch him. So we'd all be like 9, 10, 11-year-old. And there was no mats back then. It was like just like a indoor football court. And then he'd be sparring and like it was full on. You'd be see people getting their noses broke, blood all over and whatnot. They'd wear these like they weren't boxing gloves. They were like you put your fingers inside and it had like padding on. They were kind of I don't know. They're not like traditional boxing gloves. You could maybe grab with them. The thumb was like this, and
Kind of like the
then wear
Bruce
some
Lee Enter the Dragon gloves.
kind of like that, but they were closed. They weren't like the Bong Sao kind. They were like contact karate gloves, and then they put like it was like looked like a bit of a pad on the feet, and then they go at it, yeah. And that was like my first introduction to martial arts in 1980. I think 1986 it was 1986, 87. Yeah,
You were about 10 years old.
yeah.
And was it just like going and just get beat up and then
It was like up and down in lines, a lot of like traditional, like what you think of as karate, lots of techniques, lots and lots of conditioning and stuff. Lots of conditioning. When I was 14, I started training with Arjan Barry. That was like a lot of good technique and sparring. But then I'd go to the boxing club, amateur boxing club, and it was hard sparring. And there it was like people, every time you get in the ring, people's trying to take your head off because it's kids from all the other council estates. There's like a bit of rivalry. Everyone wants to beat the kids from the other areas. And I remember getting moved up to the senior group after a few months at the boxing club because I was doing all right. I was always all right at sports at school. I'd do well for football. I'd captain the team and stuff for football. I was on the cross country team. I'd run 400 meters. I'd throw the hammer and the discus and stuff. So I was always training. So I did all right, and I got moved up, and I'd be in there like sparring with the older lads and the men. So I'd be getting some good hidings then. So it was tough times, but all good.
so why did you first say what interests you about the martial? You're like, hey, I want to try this martial arts stuff. What piqued your
From
interest?
being really young, I was always getting into fights where I lived. I was all, and when we moved from like one side of the river, which is not it's not really that far. It's probably only 6 miles, but it's like when you're that age, it's a big thing. And so we moved a week before I was 7, and I got put in a school which was I had to walk past the school to get to another school, and all the kids where I live went to the different schools. So I was fighting. It was just part of growing up. So I always thought I want to learn how to fight so I can better defend myself. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because you're saying you keep call. I've heard of the estates, but is it the whole term, the counselor estates?
Yeah, council estates. Yeah, it's like
It's like the projects what we'd have here in the projects in the
yeah,
states.
yeah. Like there were slums, and then after World War II, they started building them up and stuff. So people just lived in slums, but then they actually started building actual where you got real housing and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, we're the
Yeah,
same
there's a lot
thing.
of them here. Yeah, we have a lot of them here still.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so you grew up in the estates. It's
Yeah,
a pretty rough environment. Do you think martial arts set you on the right path, or did you
it
get
did, but
involved in some criminal?
it was always there, and I think it kind of saved me a little bit. You see, we had a big rave culture as well in this area. It was famous for raves, and it was crazy. You know, a lot of kids who I grew up with are dead or addicts and whatnot, and everyone, you know, nobody that lived there like lived a perfect life. You know, everybody ducked and dived a little bit to get by, and yeah, I had encounters and whatnot. When I was 17, I got run over in the back of the head with an axe and stuff like this. You know, a bit older, attacked by a gang. There's always something going on, just always. Yeah, and so well, when that happened to me when I was 18, I remember I was really thin. I was into boxing and stuff, and I was like as tall as I am now. I'm like 6'3", 6'2", and I've only been like 11 stone. I'm not sure what that is in pound. It's light. You know, it's like 100, maybe 170 or something for as tall as I am. I remember feeling I was overpowered, you know, when I was having a fight with this guy. He was like a man, you know, a stocky, strong fella. And I went back and had a fight with this fella a couple of weeks later when they took the staples and whatnot out of my head. And I just remember thinking I need to put some weight on. You know, so I got heavily into lifting then. Like by the time I was 20, 21, I'd put a lot of weight on. I was like 17, 18 stone and lifting, doing lots of power lifting and whatnot. So for about 2 years, 3 years, I was not doing much martial arts. I was just going on the bag a few times a week, doing a little bit of sparring. And I was big into lifting. I got seriously into lifting weights and whatnot, working on strength and putting weight on. Because I realized, you know, like in fighting, in boxing, you have weight divisions. And in my mind, it was because it's for a reason, because the bigger man is a better man, you know, for real fighting. That was the mindset that I had back then.
And what brought you back? What age were you, and what brought you back to the martial arts?
Yeah, well, again, funny story. You know, so I'm training. You know, I'm training a little bit at the gym. The guy had a gym where it was just for the doorman. I wasn't working the doors at this point, but you know, I'd, I'd do this man. I'd sort of do him favors. This man who ran the security company, like he got every door in the town where I lived. He ran security in every door. After I'd help him get them, and I might as well tell the truth. There's no lie. I'm a different man now. If the door didn't belong to him, I'd go down and I'd obviously start a fight with the bouncers and whatnot, and then he'd go down and then say, "Oh, look, you get in trouble. I'll come on." And it's just it's how you got doors back then, you know. So he ended up with all the doors and whatnot. He
You're
asked
talking
me to
about
go
doors to
do it.
nightclubs.
Yeah, yeah, nightclubs. It was quite a lucrative thing back then, obviously. And then he'd invite me to go grappling, but I didn't really. I went once to this class. They said it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it was kind of like 1999. It wasn't like, I think the guy who was coaching was more traditional, went out to the States for like a week or something and knew a little bit of groundwork, but it was like the land of the blind, the one-eyed man's king, they say, you know. And I went in, I'm looking, I'm thinking, this won't work on me. You know, this is like, what even is it? Then some guys are witnessed, "Oh, come in just on the daytime. We'll do a little bit with you." And I said, "Look," I said, like, this won't work on me. You're not going to get me down there. I'll just knock you out. They're like, "I'm not interested." I thought it was like Aikido. So nothing against Aikido, but, you know, I just thought this is like fantasy. I thought it's like a Steven Seagal movie. I thought this isn't working. But in my mind, I knew when I'd been rolling about having fights that you can end up in some bad positions on the floor, you know, and I was aware of. I remember reading about the Gracies when I was 14 in a magazine and thinking, yeah, this is real. You know, I just had a feeling like this grappling was real. But what
Well,
happened
if
was,
they had
fast
Hickson
forward,
on the cover, you just saw his face, and you're
yeah,
like, "No,
yeah,
I'm not. This guy knows something,
this
right?"
is legit, yeah. They've in I think it was the year 2000. I started going back to a different boxing gym. I started going to a professional gym, and as I said, I was heavy by this point. You know, I was like 17 stone or whatnot. And I started training seriously, and the guy was a real disciplinarian, Maxie Smith, an ex Royal Marine Commando, and he's the ex pro boxer who boxed for a Commonwealth title and whatnot. I started really enjoying it, but then he threw me out the gym because he knew I was getting into a bit of trouble, like with the security and whatnot, getting people doors and all this and that. And he was a really straight man. He was against it, and he said he didn't want to be responsible for creating somebody who might go and get yourself in a lot of trouble or whatnot.
Isn't
He
this
was
the
right.
exact same conversation Mick had with Rocky in
Yeah,
Rocky
crazy.
1?
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, like when he went for was it Grasso? Yeah. And so I was devastated. So I remember getting told this by one of the other boxers. And so I was like, oh, yeah. And at this point as well, I had a court case going on. So it was all like he thought I was going to get a decent sentence and whatnot. But I got off with this because it was self defense. I've been in a fight with self defense. So then I remember going to parties. I started like going out to nightclubs, which was something I wasn't really into. And then for about 6 months, I was like going out, clubbing and whatnot. I thought I've had enough of this. Like I want to really give this like my 100% dedication. I want to give it everything. I want to make something of myself. And I saw boxing as a way to get out. A way to do something good, to fight, but in a where you're gonna be on the back page of the paper rather than the front page. You're going to prison. You're gonna do something worthwhile. So I remember getting in my car and thinking I'm gonna go and see Maxi. I'm gonna ask him to coach me. I'm just driving out the street. Bang! I crashed my car. Couldn't believe it. So I crash. Somebody's car's damaged. I don't have a driving license, no insurance, anything like that. I asked how much the car is. I have to go and get some money. I go and pay the lady. I go and give her the money for the car. So I'm like, oh man. So I end up going out drinking. Instead of going to the boxing club, I go out and I start drinking again. And again, I'm drinking. I'm in the nightclub till late. And I was down. I remember I was dancing and everything, and that's not me. So I was definitely drunk. I was like dancing about. I was like really, really drunk. I come out the nightclub the early hours of the morning in the summer, like 2 a.m. or something. And like when the fresh air hit me, I remember like, oh man, I felt very, very drunk. I walked around the corner. I ended up getting into a bit of a fight with this fella, like a foreign guy, I'm guessing he was from Afghanistan, like the other guy. Next thing, guy comes around the corner, cauliflower ears. Like there's all pizza shops around the corner from the nightclub. He comes around, bald head, cauliflower ears, and he's coming straight at me. I remember thinking, like, I just sensed this guy had something about him. So I've swung a punch. Next thing, I'm in the sky. I remember as he's hit me with a double, I'll never forget it. I'm kind of in the air. It was a split second, but it was like it was a lifetime. I remember thinking, yes. I thought the grappling works. It works. I was like, this is it. And then I'm on the floor and we're scurrying about. And luckily, he didn't know any striking back then, although he did in time because he went on to become Cage Rage World Champion, Cage Warriors Champion. We became great friends, and I cornered him in his first MMA fights, and he taught me wrestling, and I taught him striking. But he was like trying to slap down at me. It got broke up. So then I was like, man, he's made like a fool out of me in front of all these people. I've just been like thrown about, by this guy. So I take my top off. I feel like suddenly I sobered up, and they said he's in that shop down the bottom end. There's all like a row of pizza shops. So I went around the alley, started kicking the door in. Next thing, people come out. I'm getting into, I don't know if I'm fighting him or someone. I'm getting hit over the back of the head. They come out, these Palestinians who run the eating place. They're smashing me over the head with bats. I'm on the floor and they're all trying to smash down. I fight my way up and I get around the front. I'm like, smashed in, obviously, and like angry. I couldn't believe it. I thought I wanted to go and start boxing again, sort my life out. I thought now I'm really being made a fool out of. I've been thrown about by somebody, and now I've got all this to go and sort out. So the next day, contacted Marty, the guy who ran the security company. I said, look, I need to learn that grappling, that jiu-jitsu. I said, I've got to fight with a wrestler coming up. And I went to see the guy who ran the shop. We arranged a fight on the Monday. This was the Thursday night, and we were going to fight around the back of a gym called Natural Progression in Stockton in the car park.
You arranged a street fight.
Yeah, that, straight in there. But it was funny because
the British do everything. The English do everything much more classy. They how did this go? Like, hello, love. I'd like to punch you in the face. I would.
I just went and seen the man at the place. I went, I won't say what I said, but I was like, he's got to fight with this wrestler. And yes, it was arranged. So I didn't have long. I didn't have long to learn. So I learned the sprawl and I learned the guillotine. I thought, I'll beat this man, no problem, this wrestler. And then, so I remember waiting in the car park, and I felt like I was waiting for hours and hours. They had me waiting, and I was meant to take two people. He was meant to take two people, but suddenly there's like big Jeeps pulling up as soon as the troopers. There's people pulling up. And this was like, Natural Progression was like an Asian-owned gym. So this was like the Asian part of town. Suddenly there's just Pakistanis and all these different breeds of people everywhere. And it was like as if I was in the middle of Pakistan waiting to fight the Great Gamma or something. I thought, oh, please. And he comes walking around the corner. I remember I was sober now. I thought, whoa, I thought, look at him. He had like big traps up here. And he comes walking around. I'm shouting. I remember like thinking, keep your hips back, keep your hips back. And I remember I threw a jab. I was going to throw a right cross, but I hit him with a nice jab. But then I remember just being a little bit cautious about following up with a cross. And he was shooting on my legs. I managed to get like a front headlock, but I couldn't get the guillotine. He didn't have no neck. You know, we're moving about, fighting and whatnot, and it was nothing happened. We just had hold of each other. To be honest, he couldn't. My wrestling was terrible. I knew how to foil the takedown, but I didn't know anything else. I just knew how to not get taken down. I was trying to bite at him, and it was nothing really. Then when he heard sirens, police obviously coming because there's hundreds of people in the car park, and then the police grabbed hold of it. We're like, yeah, we stopped because we heard the police grabbed hold of me and started saying, oh, look, if he wants to press charges, we're going to arrest you, because obviously he had blood on him. There was blood on my top. And I said, look, I haven't had a fight. I said, I was on the running machine. Somebody's pressed stop, and I bust my own nose. And then obviously they knew I was lying, but they're asking him, do you want to go to the police? I do not speak English. I do not speak English. And that was that. You know, I didn't get to see him for, that was 2000. In 2002, the Commonwealth Games was in Manchester. And the guy who was refereeing the freestyle wrestling, I realized that he was a local guy. He had a wrestling club. I thought it must be a decent club. So I walk in there training. Then he walks in, locks eyes on me, comes over, shakes hand, and we became great friends.
The
and we were
guy
actually
from
both
from the
training.
fight
Yeah,
site.
the guy, yeah. And we were both training at the same jiu-jitsu place at the same time, but on different nights. And the coach, after a few weeks, realizes, and all the lads are like, oh no, this is going to be like round 2, or round 3. But yeah, it all ended up well. And he has a gym now over the river. He's doing really well. He has a Cage Warriors world champion training out there, and he became a really good fighter, and we became good friends and worked on the door together and whatnot. Yeah, and he had a really interesting story. He came over from Afghanistan. He'd grown up during the occupation with Russia and whatnot. He had a really, really tough life. He used to fly helicopters and stuff for the army.
Well,
Yeah. So that was just a stroke of luck. It turned me into a grappler. I've never stopped ever since.
you
That
think
was
there's
22
something
years
about,
ago.
because I was talking to my last guest, I think it was Chingon, when I talked to him about guys meeting each other, who their first time meeting each other was a fist fight, and then they end up
Crazy.
becoming great friends. That's pretty common
Yeah.
here in the U.S. Does that
It's
happen
a
a lot?
real thing, isn't it? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, there's something about it, isn't there? Yeah, there's something special about it.
I'm trying to figure it out. It was my generation, our generation. We're close in age. It was so common to you know meet somebody. You can't stand up. You work it out through punching each other in the face, and then you're friends forever.
There's something about it. And even when you go training and rolling, there's some sort of camaraderie there, isn't there? There's something when you train, roll, spar.
That's
I don't know.
suffering.
There's something about it. Yeah, we
Yeah, the-
suffer together. Yeah.
yeah, we
And I
suffer
think
together.
having it, yeah, some people don't go and have a fight, in this life, do they? They won't, they're scared probably scared to lose, maybe. And I know now people use knives a lot because they're scared to lose. I think it's like, no, it hurts their ego a little bit. So I think there's always a mutual respect. If two people go and meet up and have a roll about, I think there's always some respect there.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
remember seeing him a few years ago and he popped up. I said, I just remember, I said, I never thanked you for that free lesson you gave me that night. And then my first free lesson, he started laughing. But yeah, that changed my life completely because I became obsessed in grappling. And then I got an injury. I had a bleed to my head. Like that was obviously there was bats to my head a few days before it affected me. And then I went sparring with a guy who ran the company and whatnot. Yeah, we went sparring. I took quite a lot of shots. It was like a tough sparring session. And then I started seeing sometimes it happened after sparring. I'd see like as if I had a migraine, like a concussion feeling. But then it ended up I had a bleed the size of a tennis ball in my head. I was in hospital for a few weeks and I lost the ability to read and whatnot. And it was like a tough, tough time. Lost loads of weight. I remember just thinking that when I'm back, I have to be able to train, but I can't be getting smashed around like training I was before. I remember watching Choke, Kicks and Gracie, and I thought, I just do this, no problem. I just learned to fight like this. And then I got my body back right, got back moving around and stuff, went and had some amateur MMA bouts, and then went off to Brazil in the 2003, went off to Brazil, train at Gracie Barra, started learning. I think I had 10 lessons in Doncaster, but they were all blue belts. I wanted to train with black belts because the year before I did a seminar with Mauricio Gomez and his son, Hodger Gracie, who at that time was a brown belt. And I was like, man, this is like, I didn't know how good these guys were in the whole scheme of things. I knew very little about. I didn't know this guy's going to be the greatest ever jiu-jitsu competitor. I didn't know who his father was and who Holmes Gracie was, his coach. I knew nothing, but I was blown away by those guys, and that's what led me to go out to Brazil.
Who'd you go to Brazil with?
I went on my own. So what happened was, I was speaking to the guys in Doncaster. I knew they'd been to Brazil, and one guy in particular from there, Ben Poppleton, he was almost living in Brazil for like the 2000 to 2005. He was in Brazil a lot of the time. And back then, you're only allowed there for 3 months, but you could like go and rip a page out your passport, get new passports, get it stamped. There was all sorts of things you could do to stay for longer. He was staying out there for a long time, and I was asking, but obviously I hadn't trained much at all. And I don't think they wanted to take me. They were thinking like, this kid's brand new. He needs to learn jiu-jitsu first. And I think the only, I contacted, there was another guy who was coming in the nightclub. He'd been out to Brazil. His father worked in Brazil, and he trained a little bit out there with, the guy had Gracie Barra Ipanema. I can't even remember the guy's name. It's so long ago. The coach there, Gracie Barra Ipanema. And he gave me an email address. Back then I didn't even know how to use a computer. I didn't really go to school much. And I remember thinking, so I've got an email address. What do I do with this? And I had to ask somebody, what's this? And then they start to explain. So I went and bought a PC. This PC, I didn't even know how to turn it on. I had to get someone who knew in the street to come and turn it on for me. And I only learned how to use a computer so I could send an email to Brazil about jiu-jitsu. And he said, yeah, get a flight, come over. And I went to compete in the National Submission League that weekend in Manchester. And that was a good thing. It was on like every month, and you got a point for a win and no points if you got a draw. And it was like a league that went on throughout the season. And Neil Owen was there, my coach from Doncaster. And I said, oh, look, I'm going to Brazil. And he was like, what? He said, you're serious, aren't you? I said, yeah, I'm going to Brazil. I've emailed somebody. I'm going to train at Gracie Barra Ipanema. He said, look, Ben's out there now. He's in Barra de Tijuca, the original Gracie Barra. Because I'm heading out there in 2 weeks. He said, get yourself a flight and you'll get picked up at the airport. So I was like, yeah, no problem. So I remember I'd met Ben Poppleton once, and I just knew that Ben was going to meet me at the airport. I didn't know much about booking flights or anything back then. I'd never really traveled abroad that much. I remember I had I went from Newcastle to Charles de Gaulle in France, and they had like an 8-hour wait over during the night. So I'm just waiting about. Then the flight to Rio. So it ended up taking me, I think it was, I don't know, about 28 hours or something from me leaving Newcastle. And I remember being on the plane thinking, I hope this Ben guy turns up, because I've got like a carrier bag full of like dirty old £5 notes and a jiu-jitsu gi and nothing else. I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, I'll just go in a taxi and just say Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So that was my backup plan. I was going to get in a taxi and say Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and hope for the best. But yeah, lo and behold, I get to the airport and I'm looking about, and then there's Ben Poppleton in the corner, and then I remember jumping in the taxi, seeing like all the palm trees. I was like, yeah, I thought I'm here now, and Ben's telling me all stories about all the fights and whatnot, what been going on. I was happy. Next morning, went to Barra Gracie for the first time. And you say about how did it feel walking into a martial arts school for the first time? Walking up those 3 floors, that was an experience. Obviously I'd competed, I'd boxed, I'd had some amateur MMA bouts, some no-gi bouts and whatnot already. Although I was very much a beginner when it came to jiu-jitsu. I remember walking up those stairs. It was like it was a funny feeling that I had. It was like the feeling of when you're going to compete. It was like that. It was very, it was very much like that. Different country, different language, different everything. And I remember on the floor, like there must have been, I don't know, like 100 pairs of flip-flops. Like people are leaving the flip-flops. I remember stepping on the mats and thinking, this is the dirtiest feeling of a mat I've ever felt in my entire life. It was a dirty, dirty gym. Obviously the jiu-jitsu was absolutely fantastic, but you'd be on the floor and there'd be like little insects like coming through the mats and crawling about on you. And there'd be like these old fans. There's like all insects, and it was like breeze blocks, but with no actual glass in. And like you just like look down. It was like, yeah, it was old school, but it was good. I like that, I think that was what was so good about Gracie Barra back then. And when you look at all the champions, like right then, it was just after the Mundials when the final was Roger Gracie versus Pedapano in the absolute, and they were both in that academy. They were there. Fitosa was there. I remember Nino Schembri was in there after he beat Sakuraba. I'm not sure how long before. Sometimes High and Gracie will be in there. It was a who's who of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And as I said, I was just a novice to this sport. I knew very little about who anybody was, but I was just, I loved it. It was great to be just to be myself, to be me again, just to be Chris again. I was just a white belt from England. It didn't mean anything. I didn't have to. Obviously, my life in England back at that time was kind of crazy, trying to keep things right because, as I said, my boss, well, he was my coach. He'd been shot. And I went and I stood on the doors for free first, and at the end, I was running his company for him. I was having to deal with a lot of things. But I was only a young lad still. I was dealing with a lot of things at that time, and it was so nice just to be me and just to. I was at total peace. Train on the morning, train on the evening. The training was hard. You do a little bit of conditioning, practice a little few stand-up throws, and then it was only really two techniques a night that you got. You got two techniques a night. Then it was sparring, 10-minute rounds, black belt time, 10-minute rounds. I remember going to get water. It was like you didn't know which bottle was which and all that. It was so busy in there, but it was absolutely amazing. The feeling I had in there, it was good. Really, really good. And it was like a huge opportunity for me to get away from the life that I was living at that time. Yeah, I loved it 100%. I was just staying on my own in Baja Beach Hotel. Yeah, good times. Like a short walk from Baja Gracie, and I'd go back, take notes and whatnot. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Then how long did you stay out there?
That first time, 3 months. Well, I think it was like about 11 weeks or something like this. It was short of the visa time. And I started to get privates off Roberto Gordo. He helped me massively because obviously I was getting smashed. And I remember after training with Gordo, sometimes I go 10 minutes and not get submitted. Whereas what I started to do, say, like I went with somebody and they submitted me 15 times in 10 minutes. The next time I go with him, I have it in my mind he's only going to get me 14 times or less. And that was like, I built up like a survival mechanism like that. But I don't think I tapped anybody out in that time while I was there. I don't think I submitted anybody. I remember coming back and training with people who I thought were really good. It was like they were all in slow motion. I was like a hot knife through butter, like pa pa pa. I was thinking, wow, I'm getting this. Like maybe I'm not so bad after all. I didn't realize how good these guys were. I didn't know they were like the best of the best. So I thought I might as well go out to the European Championships. It was the first Europeans in Lisbon. I'd heard about this while I was there, and I'd started learning about writing goals, setting goals, writing them out and whatnot. So I started writing goals. I wrote, oh yeah, I win the gold at the European Championships, and that seemed like a fantasy when I written it down in like I think September, October, But I went out there and I took gold. So I was like, oh, this is good. I'll write down another goal. I just kept on going from there, just kept on writing goals and getting on after them. Went back out there the following year, and I spoke a bit of Portuguese by then. I started practicing some Portuguese, and I started going to school out there for Portuguese and whatnot. And that really helped me then. I thought that was a really, really good trip. I made like 4 trips between 2003 and 5. I've not been out there since the January 2010 was the last time I was out there. I love going to the US now. I don't need to go to Brazil anymore.
Which is where we met.
Everything I need is there. Everything I need is inside CSW.
Yeah, that brings us exactly what I want to talk about next, which is CSW. How did you connect with CSW and Eric Paulson in the beginning?
Yeah, well, the crazy thing is, I said I went and trained with Mauricio and Hodja. That was in the Midlands in England. The following week, I remember sending off a postal order to Rick Young, who's an absolute legend of martial arts here in Europe, because he was hosting a seminar. Eric Paulson shoot fighting, I think the seminar was at the time. I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be cool. On that day, my car wouldn't start, so I couldn't go up to Scotland. And I didn't go. And looking back, if I'd have went there, I wouldn't have started going to Brazil. I'd have started going out to the United States right there and then. So my life would have took a different turn, So I just think that all things happen for a reason. And it was the first time I trained with Sensei Eric was 2011, I think it would have been. But I was always hearing stories about him when I'm training JKD grappling. I'm always hearing stories about Sifu Larry, Sensei Eric. I always thought, man, like it seemed like a dream, to get out there and to train in the US. And I went to his seminar in England. I was blown away, completely blown away. And then I went out to compete in the States, USA versus the world. It was catch wrestling. I went out to compete in 2014, June of 2014. We went and did some media the day before at Fox TV. It was for Fox Good Morning LA, I think it was called. And we went out there, and there was a competitor there from CSW. I got chatting. I said, I'd love to go out there and train with Sensei Eric because I'm a big fan of Josh Barnett also. I'd love to get out there. And then Sensei Eric said I could go through, but I couldn't make it. I went out there with one of my students, and we it was a tough old time for us. We had enough to eat like one meal a day, and we had a Herbalife shake, and we were like we were on rations, we just couldn't get out there. And I remember that day we were walking at the beach after being in the place. We were walking at Venice Beach, and I heard somebody shouting, "Can you curse on here? Can you?"
Sure.
Yeah, it was I just heard somebody shouting, "You're fucking lucky. You're fucking," like a crazy voice. And I remember, I think, whoa. And I looked, he's shouting at me. There's a guy with like unkempt, like long ponytail. He's drinking bud and he's jacked. He's screaming, "You're fucking lucky." And I'm getting closer to him. I'm like, fucking, I look down, and there's more bottles of bud. And I noticed he had a prosthetic leg. He'd been like obviously stood on a mine or something like that. I said, "Oh, I mean, oh, look at that poor man." I said, "Oh, maybe he's a war hero or something. He's hit hard times." At that point, another guy with a leg like that comes past. He's like in a wheelchair training, flying past. And I said, "How many?" I said, "Seen that?" I said, "We were meant to see that." I said, he's a victim. He's used what's happened. He's became a victim. I said, "He's become a victor." I said, "That's our life now and always. Like, we can make that choice. We're going to be victors, or we're going to be victims. Are we going to be victors, get out there, or we're going to be victims?" And I said, we're going to have to get out there and get after it. And I remember when I came home, I didn't have a car and stuff at this point. I've got a lot of kids, obviously I was, I was doing lots of voluntary work and whatnot. I wasn't working full time. I was just like day to day, I was living day to day. I'd go out and teach a few privates. I'd pay for this. I went out there by not paying for my mortgage for a couple of months. It was like a chance that we took. And I just made a vow to myself that in the future, whenever I get the chance to train at CSW, I'm gonna take it with both hands. And then I joined CSW in 2016. And apart from lockdown, I've been getting out there to those camps once a year. So I was true to myself. I went out there and got after it.
But you were doing catch wrestling before you were even with
Jared. Yeah. Well,
how did that happen? How did you get into catch?
Well, in like that time, it'd been 2001. This would have been when I started getting into the grappling. There was a guy that coached from his garage over in East Cleveland, an ex-para. We have a military, a regiment called the Parachute Regiment here in England, airborne. And, he was an ex-black belt in karate, boxer, but he did all kinds of martial arts, and he didn't call it catch wrestling. He just called it illegal old wrestling holds. He'd bring into the stuff he was teaching us. And I remember thinking, I like this because it's so basic and effective. Face bars, neck cranks. I thought, wow, why hasn't anybody shown me this already? And I'd only train it with a couple of guys because obviously it seems not very nice, do whacking face bars on each other. And then I started to obviously train with Sifu Mick. He was showing me all the stuff he learned from Larry Hartzell. But then when I had a gym out in Darlington in about 2006 or 7, these two guys came over traveling. As we have a lot of travelers through here, like gypsy people. I'd heard that these boys wanted to train me. They were like looking for me. These two brothers wanted to come and train me. That I'd heard of them being at the Freestyle Wrestling Club. But when I got to meet them, I worked on security on this door next to the train station in Darlington. I'd work it on my own. I always thought it was better just going on my own because I kept the money from this place. It was like nobody wanted to work there, but I did a good job just because I knew everybody. That was the only reason. I used to fight out of a club in Darlington, like MMA. So I knew everybody. So I'd just sit with the lads, and have a sit as they were drinking and stuff. It was easiest. It was like probably the most violent club in the area, but it was the easiest because everybody was all right. If anybody had trouble, they'd go outside and then they'd come back in. It was easy, And then these two boys had come and they'd start talking to me quite a lot and they'd ask questions about grappling. I didn't know it was them. I had no idea it was them. And then one day it clicked. I said, "Use those lads, aren't you?" And they started laughing. I went, "Oh, yeah, we've done a little bit. Can we come and train with you?" So they came in the gym. I think I was a purple belt then. I fought pro MMA and whatnot. And then they come in and I never felt anything like it. They're picking me up. They're throwing me from one end of the gym to the other. They're crushing me. The pressure that I felt, I was like, "What is this?" And I remember saying to them, "What's this?" Because I knew it was catch wrestling. And they said, "It's just wrestling." I said, "Just wrestling." I said, "What's this submission?" They said, "It's just wrestling." And they've been taught it by the dad, the granddad, it being passed down to them. But when I brought Billy Robinson to coach a seminar at my academy, and I said to him, "There's these boys," I said, and then they say it's just wrestling. And he said, if they've learned from an old time, they'll know it as just wrestling because we never called it catch as catch can. That's just what it was. It's just wrestling. So I thought, yeah, it's just wrestling. Because when you think about it, wrestling with submissions historically, that's been a lot more common than wrestling without. Wrestling without, I think, only begun in the 1908 Olympics. I think it was. They called it amateur catch as catch can, and they took all the submissions out, and that became Olympic freestyle, which catch also become folk style out in the States. So yeah, it's just wrestling. I think jiu-jitsu is just wrestling. It's all just wrestling. That's how I look at grappling. It's just wrestling. That's what it is. But these boys, I was blown away by how good they were. Then I wanted to compete in, there was an event, the first one in a long time in England in 2012. The Snake Pit hosted it. They wouldn't let me in. You had to wrestle for them. So I went over and I started training at the Snake Pit as well the following year. Competed for them, went out to the States a couple of times competing for them, and then started putting on my own events. And then also there was a wrestling booth in, I think, 2016. I went out and wrestled in the booth. It was like all comers could come and wrestle and whatnot. And there was a lot of talk about it online. I ended up wrestling a man, Joe Kowalski, who was half American, ex-US Marine, who wrestled for Roy Wood at the Snake Pit. From if I had a bout with him. At the time, he was British freestyle heavyweight champion, and it was good for me because he was more of a freestyle guy. And it was a pin or a submission counted as a point, 3 5-minute rounds. It was a great rule set, warrior rule set, they called it. And I beat him 15-0. I just thought to myself, he's a white belt. That was my mindset. Well, he's a white belt. So I went out there and just submitted the life out of him. So it was good. Tough fella he was.
So when you did hook up with Eric Paulson and CSW, what belt were you in Jiu-Jitsu at that time?
I was a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu.
So who'd you originally get your black belt?
Oh, no, a black belt in when I first ever went to the seminar, I think I would have been a brown belt then. But when I went out and trained at CSW in 2015 or 16, I was a black belt already. And I was always Gracie Barra, you see. But then something happened where my coach in Gracie Barra, Doncaster, Big Neil, the guy who arranged for me to go to Brazil, he went and moved to America for a while. And he got belted by, he was at America top team. He got belted out there. He came back and he asked, is it okay to wear the belt? Yeah, no problem. But then another guy said, you got to take it off. And then there was all this thing. So they left Gracie Barra. And then he moved off to Australia. But I used to also train at Gracie Barra in Newcastle with Dave Elliott. So I actually got my brown belt from Dave Elliott. And then I couldn't get belted because I stopped training with Dave. He stopped coaching where he was. Neil was in the US. But then, no, he was in the US, in Australia. Then when Neil came back, I got my black belt through Neil. And then once I was with CSW, I just wanted to be full on with CSW. I joined the program for the Jiu-Jitsu. And I thought you have to start a white belt again. I thought combat submission, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I just thought I've gone back to white belt, no problem. I didn't care about the color of the belt, but I never. And then I got given my first, second, and third degree from Sensei Eric, which was really, really good. You know, I got them when I got my coach level 1 and 2, and then while you were out there, when you got your belt that day, and you've been I think you've been a purple belt even longer than I was a purple belt. I was like, "Wow, I finally met somebody that was a purple belt longer than me."
I remember I was going to ask you about that next because you said you had been a purple belt for 8 years, and for those who don't know, I was a purple belt for 12 years.
Higher belts than me. They started getting higher belts. My students would go elsewhere and they were belted higher than me. I was like, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah, I've got friends that I got into jiu-jitsu when I was a blue belt or even a purple belt that were black belts, and I'm still a purple belt.
It's a crazy thing. I was so happy when you got that day because I know it's good. It really is. It's important. It's nice.
Yeah.
I'll be there when you get your black as well, God willing.
God willing, absolutely. But you were a purple belt for 8 years, you said?
I think about 8 years, yeah. Then I think I've been a brown belt in judo for longer than I have. Yeah, I've been a brown belt in judo forever because I only really did judo because I was taking my kids to judo. And I'd jump on. They'd say, hey, do you want to come on? Do you want to come on? And then I go, but I still need how it works. Do you know how it works for black belt in judo in England for judo?
Well, in the US, generally you have to compete a little bit.
Yeah, well, here in England, you can go to gradings. But if you win 2 fights out of 3, you get a lineup of 3. But when I went, they knew me from jiu-jitsu. So they went, oh, look, he's getting lineup of 5. So you're getting the 5 best from the day. So you go out and you bow to 5 people. Then you have 5 matches all in a row.
Oh, wow.
You got to beat them all. You got to beat them all by a pawn to get it that way.
Yeah.
If you don't, any match you win, you get 10 points. So I have 3 points. I need to get another 70 points or I'll beat the lineup. But I just don't really go doing judo. But I've been coaching some judo guys. They've been cutting my jiu-jitsu class. And look, you need to get your black belt. Our coach, who's a legendary man, Joe Glynn, I think he's 94. He said, look, he wants to come in and coach you and he wants you to go and get your black. So I'm going to have to go and fight for my black because I'm going to have to. It's nice judo. For Joe, you know, it's a great sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I really respect judo. And I think it's a really tough sport.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to stop at brown belt.
Yeah, I've played with the idea of like if you have kids starting with judo first and then have them do
Yeah, my
jujitsu.
kids all did it. Yeah, they all
You
signed
know,
up for judo and wrestling, and my kids
yeah,
love sambo as well, which is kind of I feel a mixture of them all.
yeah, absolutely. So what was it like the first time you trained with Coach Eric? Was there like a
Absolutely amazing because it was how I like martial arts to be. You know, everything was like good striking, wrestling, grappling. Everything was good, and it was like things that I'd learned from Sifu Mick. But obviously, done no disrespect to Sifu Mick, but done at a much higher level. You know, and I was like, I was blown away. Every
so
time I'm on the mat with him, I come away with learning something I thought I already knew. I learn how to do it better, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, and
And I love all of those leg locks. The way he teaches leg locks, absolutely amazing.
well, he's the guy who hipped Hicks into the leg lock game.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I watched an interview on JRE about that.
yeah, that's incredible. So at this point in your life, you've got your black belt. You
Yeah.
you've trained in Brazil. You're part of CSW. When did you decide to open your own academy, Legit Pro Wrestling?
Since like the beginning, like when my coach was in hospital, there was nobody to carry on the training sessions. So I just like would do it. Just somehow I started coaching the others, which was strange. I just started coming up with little sessions. But even when I was doing contact karate, I remember after a few months, I'd like worked out the black belt syllabus because whatever the belts were getting in the room when I'm doing my own, I'm watching everybody. I go home, take notes, and then I had one guy, a friend of mine at school. I'd coach him. I'd coach him whatever I'd learned. I'd coach him. So I've always liked to coach. So for a long, long time, I've been coaching since 2002. I've coached nonstop. I've always had a group of guys who I've turned up and coached since 2002. And we've been using the name Legit Pro Wrestling since, I believe, 2015, because we want to start putting on events. And I thought, well, what is catch wrestling? It's Legit Pro Wrestling. It's win by pin or submission. So it was like the tongue-in-cheek name, sort of thing. It was
Yeah, I was
like,
going to
called
ask you
Legit Pro
about that.
Wrestling. Yeah.
Do you ever get people looking to get into like
Oh,
WWE
man.
come to the
When we opened, it was crazy. The guys messaging me, wanting to come and try out and stuff, like crazy, like, indie guys. And yeah, it was fun. We had some fun.
so do they ever stay? Like, hey, they want to be in the UFC, but they
No,
come and they
nobody
because the
stays.
history of
No,
because the history of what became pro wrestling today really starts with catch.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because what would happen was, they'd fix matches. That's what would happen. They'd fix matches, and then in the end, it just became a total war. But we're all watching now. We're watching this happen to boxing. Wrestling was once a legit thing. It become a work, and we're seeing it happen in boxing now with these YouTube matches and fake belts, YouTube matches, fake fights, and a lot of the time, obviously, boxing is all about keeping that on. I remember having a friend who was building up his record in pro boxing 10, 12 years ago, and he was doing what they call carry jobs, where he's just told to take the man the distance. It's just, boxing. I just think it's going down the slope that wrestling went. I just think that these YouTube matches are gaining more attention than the actual bona fide boxing matches that are
Yeah.
happening. And even when it's boxing matches, people want to watch Tyson Fury, not just because of his boxing skills, but because of the theater that he brings. People are into all that. They really are.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways Tyson Fury's probably the best thing we've seen in
Yeah, I mean,
professional boxing in a long, long time.
I agree. Yeah,
Not
when you
only
think
the
he's
theater
a
he brings, but
giant.
yeah, but he moves like a much smaller man, and he's very technical for his size and his stature and his build, and
I
he's
couldn't
just
believe it when I set eyes on him. That man's a giant. He had to duck
really,
down to get through the door. Yeah, I
oh
thought,
yeah,
imagine trying to box a man what's that big and switch hits.
yeah,
And now he's with
absolutely,
Sugar Hill. I think he's an even better version because
hmm
he's hitting now and he's hitting with serious power, isn't he?
yeah, yeah. He's definitely some. I'd love to see him. What if he came over and did a couple MMA matches? Wouldn't
Imagine
that?
that. I know he went and did some training. He went to Calbon. He was doing a bit with Darren Till. I saw the video.
Imagine if he
It'd
got a
be
purple belt,
interesting.
if a legit purple belt, and then went into the UFC.
And he's been did WWE already, hasn't he?
I don't know. Has he?
Yeah, he went and did Crown Jewels. Yeah, and
Oh
I
well.
know his son's training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's already been training it. I know his
Yeah.
bodyguard's got a black belt in Jiu Jitsu, so I wouldn't be surprised. He'll
If he
know
knows a little
enough.
bit. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Imagine grappling a jiu-jitsu match against that guy? That
I
gorilla just
reckon
grabs
that
you?
his strength is just crazy. I reckon
Yeah.
his strength when he's on the inside is just absolutely phenomenal. No, a friend of mine sparred with him and with Anthony Joshua. And
Hmm.
this is even when AJ was undefeated as well. I said, who would win in a fight? He said, it's not even a close thing. He said, Tyson Fury's a different level altogether.
I believe it. I believe it. You're
Yeah,
listening, Tyson. Come train at Legit Pro Wrestling in
imagine that.
Stockton. Yeah, that'd be awesome. But so
It
another
really
thing I
would.
did want to ask you about, and you kind of we talked about it briefly in the beginning, is at your gym you also have um uh I would call him a minister or a preacher or a pastor.
Yeah,
Uh, I think you in one of the videos I watched you called him a chaplain.
yeah,
Um,
Gram Seed.
Yeah. So how did you connect with Graham Seed, and
Well,
do you blend Christian values with your martial arts teachings, or at your
I think that
academy, or is
that's
it separate?
I think that's like who I am, No,
Mhm.
that is what I am. But it's funny because we have Muslims, we have Sikhs, we have all kinds of religions in there, and we welcome everybody. Well, that's what I follow. But what happened with Graham was I got given his. I was trying to find his book. A friend of mine, one of my fighters, was in prison, and he had a phone. Obviously, everyone has phones in the cells, don't they? He had a mobile. He put it on the night. He'd ring me every night and chat with me. He said he never read before because he was a traveller. Travellers don't usually go to school, and not many of them can read. He said, "I've read a book. First time I've read a full book in my life." He said, "It's a man called Graham Seed." He said, "He's from your area." He said, "He's a Christian." He said, "You're not going to believe what you're reading this book." So I'm trying to find it. It just came out. I couldn't find it anywhere. Then something happened, and I went around the house on a Sunday and I got given the book. I said, "Oh, look," because Graham was in another jail, which was an open prison when people are coming out for weekends. And somebody else, people are asking Graham for just, they mentioned me saying that I want to read his book and whatnot. And then his phone number was in it. And I remember, I started reading it and I knew it was real. I knew it was real. I tried to follow Christianity in the past and stuff and think it's only for like people, posh people with them collars on, like vicars, priests. I always felt not very welcomed in church and whatnot. But when I was really young, a little kid, I'd pray for hours. Like I knew, I think the children do. I remember hearing a voice in my head saying, "Ring Graham," and I thought, I'm hearing the voice. I thought, this isn't normal. No, then I thought, I just will. So I left a message on his answer phone and said, "I'm hearing a voice telling me to ring you and all this." I thought, I put it down. I thought, he's never going to ring me. So I think I'm a pure psychopath, And, I was going to do something serious, a bad person. I was going to see somebody who did something bad. And it was like something where that'd be it. If you know what I mean. I remember the phone rang when I was outside this place, and it was all camera and everything anyway. And I just told him what I was going to do. And I told him why. I said, I might as well tell you on the phone. It could be getting listened to. I said, because like this is it. I said, but the only thing is, I said, my son is in nursery. I don't know who's going to pick him up from school. And he said, well, look, you're a good man. He said, because Jesus says you got to love the Lord your God with all your heart. He said, then you got to love your family. He said, so if you love your family, that means you're a good man. And he started telling me about Nicky Cruz, who was leader of the Mau Mau's in New York, a violent gangster and whatnot. And he gave it all up and he become a Christian. And I was thinking, wow, this sounds all right. He said, do you want to come and meet me in 2 days' time? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I went and met him in a church called the Tab in Stockton. So this was, he took his son to school. This had been like 9:15 in the morning. We just chatted all day long till 2:30, like time passed like that. They said, do you want to ask Jesus into your life? And I'd already did that before and I'd messed up. I didn't know you can have more than one chance. I said, yeah, 100%. So he prayed for me. I asked the Lord into my life. And I felt differently instantly. I felt differently. And a couple of days later, it was the following day, in fact, like Heidi is my wife now. She messaged saying that she was getting baptized. And I said, oh, I've just asked Jesus into my life. But it was funny because a few weeks before I'd seen Heidi and I'd just seen a guy who would like try to leave me a lot before. And I mentioned about it to her and I felt a bit stupid. I thought she was going to think like I'm mad talking about God. And I didn't know that she was going to church too. And so she invited me to a prayer meeting. And I remember I just finished a Thai session. I went round and these people who were outside, I just thought these were like the nicest looking, kind people I've ever met in my life. And I thought, like, what am I doing here? They're going to think, why is he here? And all this and that. I remember we went up into this room and they started laying hands on people and praying and stuff. And I just wanted to get out and run out there. I thought, what is this? I remember I wanted to run out, but I didn't want to be, I'd have been ignorant, but I made a vow to myself. this is the last time I ever go to church. I'm never, ever coming to church after this. Next thing, people are praying. I start praying in tongues. I didn't even know where it was. And I feel like the Holy Spirit, I've never felt that good in my entire life. And I was like, what is this? And then this nice lady gave me a CD worship music. I put it on in my car. I've got this music, worship music on full blast. And I'm just like, yes. It was like a total, like a transformation, a total transformation. And then I had like security contracts, companies and all that. And I just knocked them all on the head. Anything that I was doing just stopped overnight, totally stopped. Got married, changed, started to set up youth projects and stuff. But obviously it was hard because I didn't have a living anymore. So I was more or less living by faith, teaching privates, and just it was very, very tough at first. I remember being in the town. I had enough money one day to buy a pasty, a pie to share with my wife and buy some baby milk for our son. I went there to sign like Social Security, something I'd never thought I'd do. And I said to my wife, I said, look, I said, I've got to go and get some money. I said, I'm trying to live like this for the Lord. I said, it's not happening. I said, like, I'm embarrassed. I'm going to get some money. She said, look, I told you I don't want that old life. It's gone. You just got to keep on going forward. And then I did, bit by bit. Things got better. And then, the Lord doesn't forsake you. And, I'm just totally blessed to live the life that I live right now. Oh, yeah. And then Graham brought out another book, and I named it It Must Be Love. Because the first book was called One Step Beyond, and there's a band called Madness, and he was trying to think of what else can we call it, and I said, let's call it It Must Be Love. And we prayed about whether that should be the song, and then it came on Sky Sports. It came on It Must Be Love, like just after we finished praying. So in the book, Graham says about what I was about to go and do, and about how I named that book It Must Be Love within like a few months. So it was miraculous. I see it as, it was a total transformation.
Now, everything you've been through in your life and the martial arts and your personal journey and faith and everything, what are the lessons? What's the big lesson you've learned that you'd like to pass on?
I think you got to have faith. You got to have faith. I don't think you can do it on your own. I really do believe that I believe in God 100%, and I think you got to find your way and walk on. I just fully believe that whatever you give out will come back. So if you're running about and if you live in a certain way, that's going to come back and it's going to hit you on the head. But if you go out and you're just pouring goodness out there, that will come back too. I really believe that. Not karma, but I just think it's like you reap what you sow, and I just think that you have to get out there and you have to try to be good. I remember, reading the scripture about money's root of all evil, but that's not actually correct. It's lost in translation. That's another thing. A lot's lost in translation. So don't let the Bible confuse you. Look into the translations, because there's a lot of wisdom in there. And it's mammon. The love of mammon is the root of all evil, and mammon is the demon that gets you to do bad things for money. So if you're getting money in a bad way, you can't have good luck. I know I have a lot of Muslim students as well, and they call it haram. Haram money. They say if you're doing bad things to get money, bad things will come. And I really, really fully believe in that. You should never feed your children with bad money. You've got to sow good seeds. You really have got to sow good seeds. If you want a good harvest, you have to put good seeds in there. And I don't think, if you've been living in a certain way and you want to change, it won't happen overnight. It's like, you're going to be put to the test, but, just keep on having faith, keep on walking forward, and you'll get there, because God will never, ever forsake you. You got to give it everything. You got to be red hot. You got to go all the way. You can't be lukewarm. You got to get in there. You got to give it your best shot, because, things will happen. You'll think you're going crazy, and then bang, it will work. It's real. And the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, it's the holy wind is the real translation, and that holy wind will blow you to where you're supposed to be. I have no doubt. It's the truth. So if you're watching this now, it resonates with you, pray. Good things will happen. Good things will come. You don't have to live. You can. We're not trees. We can move. If you're around bad people, you can get away from them. A lot of people I was around, right before meeting Graham, they're doing big sentences and stuff. They've been to jail, they've come out, and that's no life. There's more to life than that other world. It's no good. It's no good at all. So just try and do all you can to live an honest life. An honest pound is worth more than £1,000 that's dishonest. You know, just get out there and live an honest life. It's the best thing you can do.
Wise words from a man who's been there. And I appreciate your time today, man. You've given us a lot to think about.
It was a pleasure.
And
we went off on a tangent. I'm blessed that it did.
Oh man, it was great. It was great. I loved every moment of it. Yeah, I don't think it was a tangent. I think it's what the Lord wanted to have happen, right? But
and I think that fighting in the street and all that, keep away from it. You know, because they say done with great power comes great responsibility. So once you know how to look after yourself and whatnot, keep away from all that because you're gonna get in serious trouble. You know, just get in the gym. If you're tired from training all the time, you're not going to be out there in clubs. Nothing good happens after midnight. I remember Derrick saying that. You know, so just don't be going out there where there's crazy people who have weapons and whatnot. You know, keep out those nightclubs. I've seen so many crazy things happening there. Just live a good, honest life and get yourself around good people, and everything will work out for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, man.
Thank you very much. God bless you, Derrick.
I can't wait
Speak soon.
So yeah, let's hopefully I'll see you this year at this coming year, 2023 at CSW.
I'll be out in the States also in February. I'm competing in a catch tournament, so I'm looking forward to getting out there and competing in 6 weeks and 6 days. I'm counting down.
Awesome, man. We'll stay in touch. God bless.
Brilliant. Take care. God bless you.
And there you have it, my conversation with the truly fascinating Chris Crossan. If you're ever in the Stockton-on-Tees area in the United Kingdom, please stop by his school, Legit Pro Wrestling, and show him some love. His links are in the description. You can also follow my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild, art by E. by Canales. Yep, E. by Canales is doing the art. Follow that project. The link is in the description. And don't forget to watch Lion Killer, my debut feature film. That's right, I made a movie. It's called Lion Killer. It stars Regina Ting-Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it at Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee, the Roku channel, or you can pop on over to the YouTube channel called V Movies. And thanks for watching this episode of FURYCAST. But before you go, please make sure to like this video, comment down below, let me know what you think, subscribe, and yes, please smash that bell. Till next time, peace.